Welcome, everybody, to Beauty Inside Out on this Sunday, the 27th, with our returning guest, Patrice Pompey, that is a physician's assistant in the medical field. Of course, that would be the medical field, but we're coming back this week and we're finishing up on the topic of medically how our beauty is affected from the inside out. And before on July the 13th, we discussed or had conversation basically on most things that you would deal with as far as blood work, medications, environment, that kind of thing. You can view that at on YouTube on our channel, on the Roxlocks channel, and how to get there is at Roxlocks dash systems, and that will take you to our page, and you can view that our first episode there. So today we're going to get into information about our gut and how our gut and our genetics play a part in our beauty on the inside out. And so, um, Patrice, can you just kind of go back in for those who didn't get to see our first segment? Will you reintroduce yourself and say, from whence you come?
Yes. So my name is Patrice Pompey. I have been working in medicine for over a decade. I am a registered certified by the state of Texas physician assistant. I have worked in primary care for the last 6 years. Prior to that, cardiology. Prior to that, emergency medicine. So I kind of have been in several different areas of medicine. Um, I have a really, really, really strong passion, and I feel like my thing that I'm so passionate about is about educating patients, having a really good understanding of how your body impacts your health and how all the parts and things that we do impacts your health. So that's kind of where Roxanne and I kind of met and kind of shared our passion for this holistic health, and especially when it comes to the hair and skin and beauty, how your health impacts those things. So we got to touch a lot of lifestyle stuff and how medicine and how all these things intersect on the last airing. So we'll kind of talk a little, some of that will come back around. So some of this is all interconnected. So we'll talk about gut health specifically, but a lot of that ties into some of the other things from our previous cast.
So in our conversation when we're talking about gut health, give us a a layman's point of view of the importance of the environment. One, what should be the environment of the gut, and how do we make sure that it is, from a medical point of view, how do you know if your gut is in the place that it should be for you to have optimal health, which, that starts with your inside. And then again, as we talked before, a lot of times with gut health or our health overall, our medications, the environment, that kind of thing shows in your hair, skin, and your nails, especially the scalp skin, from where my point of view that I deal with and see clients on a regular basis. So what is it that you can say from a physician that you can look at a person, or let's start internally first, since we're talking inside out. Give us the ramifications of what gut should be, or
Gut health is a term that we probably have heard more about in the last 5 to 10 years. I'm not sure that we have a comprehensive idea when we hear that term or what that means, but inside your gut, you have billions and billions and billions of microbes. So this is bacteria, this is some fungi. These are things that are actually working to our benefit to help perform some of the functions of the body. So, we have these in our gut. What we do from an external perspective has a direct impact on what bacteria, what things are present in our gut. And that has countless other implications. So, when you hear the term gut health, what they really are talking about is if the bacteria or the microbes in your gut are appropriate. Um, and those microbes are important for like absorption of your nutrients. So when we were having conversations previously about deficiencies and minerals and vitamins, the gut health kind of plays a role because certain bacteria or biome in your gut help you absorb some of those micronutrients from your foods. Absence of those microbiome particles or bacteria also make you more likely or more vulnerable to be deficient to some of these micronutrients. Your gut health or your microbiome also plays a role in inflammation. So the bacteria or organisms you have or don't have in your gut leave you more vulnerable or more resistance to inflammation. They impact your hormones. So they help communicate with the brain, help communicate with some of the other glands in the body. You want to have a really diverse microbiome in your gut because that's what has kind of been associated with the best outcomes in terms of health. So, your diet obviously impacts what bacteria you have in your gut. A lot of the healthy organisms in your gut, they like fiber. So, we don't digest fiber. So, when you have a diet that's high in fiber, some of those fibers that we're not digesting directly are actually feeding those gut bacteria or organisms. So, when you are not properly consuming your vegetables and all the micronutrients, certain bacteria or organisms in your gut are not able to live, survive, or thrive. And that again has an impact on your nutritional absorption, hormonal balance, inflammation. So these things are directly connected. Stress can impact your gut health, hydration, obviously antibiotics. We take antibiotics for infections. They are good, but they are not smart. They don't know which bacteria is always to keep and which ones to get rid of. Sleep impacts your gut health. So some of these things you'll see are interconnected. So we talk about sleep and how it influences your hair and skin. We talk about nutrition. We talk about activity, but some of this is also having an impact indirectly on your hair and skin through how it changes your gut health.
So when you
And
mentioned, I'm sorry, go ahead.
you got it? No, go.
So when you mentioned the fact that something about fiber in us not processing fiber, and then you hear that fiber needs to be in the diet. How do you
Mm-hmm.
know, one, which type of fiber we should be having, um, that ultimately is not an adverse effect to uh, our well-being?
So we should be getting fiber in the realm of 5 to 10 grams a day in our diet. If I'm telling you the best source of fiber, I'm telling you natural sources. I'm telling you your veggies. You want to be very diverse in your vegetable intake because you give your body the most opportunity to get all the nutrients and fibers that you need. So when I say diverse, I mean diverse. You want all the colors of the rainbow, diverse in the preparations. So you want to have lightly cooked, steamed, raw, all these different preparations in your diet. Um, how that looks from a symptomology is that when you have issues with constipation, when you have issues with diarrhea, either end of that spectrum is somehow related to fiber intake. If you are intentional about getting your fiber into the diet and still struggling, and or you're not getting them through your diet and you're aware of that and you look to supplement, most people do well with something like a psyllium husk. So this is like a fiber supplement you can get, you can buy it. These are your benefibers, Metamucil. So you can add those to the diet. They're less ideal, but they will help with some of the things that we try to accomplish by incorporating natural fibers into the diet. So gut health, what you notice, whether you're gassy, whether you have acid reflux, whether your bowel movements are normal, if you eat and then you feel that fullness in your stomach, or you eat and you're bloated and uncomfortable for hours and hours, that usually is all an indication. That's what we most commonly associate with gut health. There are some other indications, skin, acne, breakouts, things like that. But when you are looking from a gut perspective, you're looking at how regular are your bowel movements normal in frequency and consistency, and if you are having any other GI related symptoms around food. So like when you eat, you get gassy, if you're uncomfortable, if you're full, if you're noisy, or if you have urgency when you go to the restroom. Number two, those all are usually an indication that you need to in some way evaluate your gut health.
So typically in life period, what would you say is the most thing that you've run across that with your patients that they feel like they're getting proper fiber and feeding their gut health, but they really are adding, is that individual? Does that where genetics begin to play in? Like, say, for instance, I'm thinking along the lines of like they say that kefir and yogurt, those are things that are supposed to be good for your health. But if you're lactose
Mhm.
intolerant, then how does that play into whether or not that's good, bad, or ugly for an individual?
So a lot of that, some some of it is based on like food tolerances, but you think about it like this. Um, I can tell you right now, if you are somebody who you don't eat a lot of fiber, and that's not, you don't eat a lot of vegetables, and I go tell you to, hey, increase your fiber. You may go get a whole bunch of fiber, but because that's not your normal diet, it may cause you some GI distress. And the logic behind that is that whatever you consume, you need particular bacteria in your gut to be able to process what you're consuming. If you're if you are someone who has not historically eaten a lot of fiber, most likely you don't have that bacteria present in your gut, because what you feed is what your gut will create. So if you don't provide those bacterium or those organisms with the proper food, they will just go away. So if you're somebody who does not eat fiber, you may actually consume fiber and be like, I feel miserable initially because you don't have the appropriate bacteria in your gut to be able to process the amount of fiber that you are intaking. So there is an element of that happens. And that's probably the most common thing I see. I see people and I'm telling them, hey, increase your fiber. And they do it and they come back and they're like, I'm miserable. Like my gut is all out of whack. And it's really because they don't have the bacteria or the organisms in their gut based on their historic dietary practices to actually process those foods. And it does take a little bit of time. So when you mention things like kefir or kombucha, those are really good ways to actually feed the good bacteria.
Mhm.
So they have probiotic characteristics. So they actually provide some of that food that help nourish the presence of good bacteria in your gut. So it usually is a bit of a process. So it's not like, I tell you that you can eat fiber and then all is well. There usually is, hey, let's just
Mhm.
slowly increase your fiber intake while also providing those probiotics to help nourish and promote the growth of the bacteria that you need to be able to process the fiber appropriately without being uncomfortable.
So,
So,
a lot of people, this is the I want it now generation. I want to see results yesterday, even though I came to you tomorrow, right?
mhm, mhm.
With that being said, is there anything in the medical field now that somebody's having a problem or somebody's having a problem with their gut? Most of the time there's a test of something that can be done. Is there any sort of testing that you can do in order to be able to see whether or not somebody's gut is off balance? Is that what kind of work is that? Is there anything?
So there are so many ways you can assess that indirectly. But if you want to directly look at that, that usually is like it's a breath test. So they have an H2 breath test, and we use that to look for like certain intolerances, but we also look to use that for like small bowel overgrowth. So bacteria overgrowth in the small bowel. And what they usually do is that you breathe into a tube, you drink a solution, you breathe into the tube, you send it off to the lab. What the lab will do is they will tell you how much of these bacteria you have. They'll give you an idea of what's optimal, what's normal, and then you can kind of use that to help like target your approach in terms of where you are, what you need to be doing different, better to address your microbiome. There are also some other indirect tests, like sometimes this is. We look at the root cause, and the root cause can be things like H. pylori. So there are particular tests that you can use to check for H. pylori. There are some stool tests that we can use to indirectly determine your gut health or where we need to be targeting. So definitely if you think that gut health is an issue, there are so many different areas where you can go and assess your gut health so you can kind of identify and then target wherever you should be targeting to improve gut health.
So from my perspective in serving in serving my clients, is there anything that, I from experience can look like we talked about in our first episode, that there's medications that I can tell, I could look and see that a person is likely to be on X type of medication because of the appearance of their scalp, or
Mhm.
the appearance of their dander, or the smell of the what's coming off of the scalp. There's things that just by experience has let me know that there's certain things that are there. Is there anything that I could be aware of in serving my clients that would help me to know that, um, even if they think they're the healthiest of the health, that would say, you might want to, because I'm seeing X, Y, and Z your nails, or your scalp. Is there anything that you could
Mhm.
advise me on?
For sure. So, um, you have those general GI issues, and the manifestations can go from your mouth all the way down to your backside. So your mouth, a really common thing that I see is that when people have issues with bad breath, a lot of times bad breath is one of the first and most common things we see when your gut health is off, because that impacts the bacteria that's growing in your mouth and your oral mucosal membranes. That's a really good way to kind of tell. And sometimes even from an oral health perspective, I have patients who come in and say, my dentist said that I should do this because they see this.
Mm-hmm.
Also, when it comes to like beauty, so whenever I see things like extremely brittle nails, I usually think about that. And then again, so that's why I say a lot of these things are intertwined. So one of the things that I see commonly when your gut health is off is that there's usually some underlying iron deficiency because of absorption issues. So when you start to see thinning, when you start to see thinning of the hair, like shaft strand, when you start to see thinning in the way where you're shedding more and you get more visibility of the scalp in your hair, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times it's also related to gut health. I can this is extreme cases, but when you think about people who suffer from like gluten intolerance or celiac disease, that's one of the things that you see. You see thinning and increased shedding. You get to see more of the scalp, and it usually is in that center kind of area
Mm-hmm.
here.
Right.
Those are all early signs, even before I can detect true like iron deficiency anemia, that there's some issues. And a lot of times that stems from whether you're iron deficient for a host of other reasons, but sometimes it's gut health that's causing you to notice that. So
Okay.
whenever I
Okay.
see like, brittle nails, thinning hair, increased shedding, and then you also can kind of see sometimes some change in like the texture of your hair,
Mm-hmm.
just because of the lack of nutrients and
Right.
how that impacts your hair. So anytime you see any drastic change from a normal or deviation from that person's normal, it can also be a sign that there's something going on with your gut health. And anytime I'm thinking like, oh, this is a nutrients thing, and it looks like a nutrients thing, but I can't identify any true nutrients deficiency or inadequacy in consumption, sometimes it means that you are eating enough of it, but your gut, because of what's going on in your gut, you're not able to absorb and utilize those
Uh-huh.
nutrients.
Right.
So,
So you might
and
be,
this is
I'm
dealing
sorry.
with stuff.
So you may be eating, but because you have an absorption issue, because I've been told, because of the autoimmune, that I don't absorb properly. So,
Yep.
so yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, and even more so, a lot sometimes
She froze.
to think, oh, this is a nutritional deficiency, but you can't or you don't find evidence to support that. The next thing that you look or you go to is looking for a gut health issue.
Okay. Okay. That makes perfect sense to me. Um, you mentioned that, stress can also, we talked about, how that would impact your blood levels and that sort of thing last, previously on the 13th. And our first interview with you.
Mhm.
You mentioned something about our stress level and our sleep patterns um, can also be interrupted because our gut is not proper. Did I hear that correctly?
Say it one more
That
time.
that our stress level and
Hmm.
our sleep pattern can also be a direct result from not having good gut. Um,
So the influence is back and forth. So, stress can impact the bacteria you have in your gut. Poor sleep habits can influence the bacteria you have in your gut, and vice versa.
okay,
So it's a two-way street. So
okay.
um, they play both major roles in supporting good gut health. Um, and it kind of becomes this vicious cycle. So if you don't sleep well, it impacts what bacteria you have in your gut. That bacteria that you have in your gut may change, and then that impacts your sleep patterns because of hormonal things. So it kind of goes into this cycle,
Mhm.
and
You
it could
know,
be
and
causal.
so what I'm hearing is that gut health is extremely important because of the fact that that's the way we intake, that's the way we feed ourselves is through our gut, obviously, because we need to eat. And then everything else, if we're out of balance with that, or if we have allergies to um, certain things or certain types of food, that's also going to affect us.
So the coolest thing about gut health, right, is that they've done these really cool studies, and they have these mice, and the mice come and they have no bacteria in their gut. They're called null mice, and they have another mice over here that's showing signs of depression or whatever. They take that gut health and bacteria from that gut and they put it into these other mice, and then these other mice cells demonstrate the same patterns.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't always realize it, but what goes on your gut, it actually your these little organisms communicate with our neurotransmitters. So they communicate directly with our neurotransmitters, so much so that they do a study and they say if you eat pastry and caffeine for breakfast, you have 40%, 40 to 60% more risk of anxiety, depression, things like that. So the connection is so strong. And then you think about the other feedback. When you're nervous or you're anxious, you start to feel that in your gut. You say, "Oh, I got butterflies in my stomach." So this communication goes back and forth. And so stress directly impacts what happens in your gut, and what goes on your gut directly impacts our vulnerability for certain like stress related things like anxiety and depression. Those things both have impact on things like our hormones, our nutritional absorption. So then it kind of gets back into that feedback loop.
So Patrice, if there was anything that you would refer someone to educate themselves on the importance of gut health or to check themselves, is there anything that like a read or is there anything that would be a read that one would be able to do?
So there's a book called Eat for Life.
I
Um,
have that.
and it it's a bit, I won't say it's extreme, but it kind of takes you through how what we eat impacts our gut, impacts our immune system. It is really a good place to start if you are really interested in how food impacts us from a general health perspective. And it gives actionable things that you can take, you can do, things that you can implement that are really not as extreme as we think, but kind of very powerful and impactful. One of the biggest things about on that book is they talk about something called G bombs. So these are things that we should be eating every day: greens, beans, onions, mushrooms, berries, seeds. Incorporating those into our diet increases antioxidants. They're cancer fighters. They help with things like skin and hair. So that's an amazing, amazing book. Dr. Perham, I think, is the author of it. But good read.
Can you drop that in the chat when you have a moment?
I will do.
I got it, the Eat for Life, but I didn't get the author. So let's
Okay,
switch
I
up a
will.
little bit and turn to our genes. Those are things that are given to us. There's nothing that we can do about it. it is what it is? Or is there something we could do about it? We think that we have these genes, and say, for instance, I'm predisposed to diabetes because my parents were diabetics. Is there
Hmm.
anything that we can do as far as our gene pool goes that can affect us positively, even if we have quote unquote negative, you know, a negative setup?
So the what I usually like to say about genetics is like your genes load the gun, but your actions pull the trigger. So for most things, this is not all inclusive. There are some genetic things that just, we can't lifestyle away. But for a lot of things, there are opportunities for us to optimize our lifestyle based on our genetic makeup so that we can minimize the opportunity to have these diseases or poor health or less than optimal outcomes. So you can have everybody. I have had people who say everybody in my family is a diabetic by the age of 40. Okay, that does not necessarily mean that you have to become a diabetic by the age of 40. It just means that you have that information, you are aware, and then now you have to combat, you have to find ways to um, compensate for that vulnerability. And without being like too nerdy and too, medical, there are different lifestyles that we can partake in that turn on and turn off expressions of certain genes.
Hmm.
So again, you can't put all genes into that box, but what you do from a lifestyle standpoint definitely can impact what genes are expressed and what genes are suppressed. So, there are things that you can do,
Okay.
even despite genes.
Despite the fact that we were given this. So, say for instance, with me, there is the diabetes is definitely the in the gene pool. But what about things that are, and just discovered this recently, with the help of my holistic practitioner, that I do carry the BRCA, and
Mm-hmm.
come to discover that BRCA, the mutation there, has to do with chromosome 13. Is there
Mm-hmm.
anything in science or any of that can help ward off? Um, because typically what they have found with that is by a certain age, it will rear its ugly head if you are also BRCA positive, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything that has been found in science with chromosomes and that, because that's part of genetics,
Mm-hmm.
when there's a defect that you can help ward that off, like we were talking about with the diabetes too?
Uh, a lot of that is based on lifestyle. So you can have a BRCA gene and knowing that, say I know that and I'm 15 or I'm 20, how does that impact what I do and what opportunity do I have to minimize my vulnerability? So you have a gene, there's not anything I can do to make you not have the gene to change your baseline vulnerability, but there are some things knowing that you can do, and it sounds boring and it sounds like not very exciting, but you think about this, cancers, they like sugars. So then you adopt a lifestyle that is going to be contrary to what promotes that type of disease. Um, there are certain things some certain benefits you get when you are active. So doing those things, prioritizing your sleep, you already have a vulnerability. So you want to make yourself a less than easy or optimal target for that
Hmm.
cancer. How you
Hmm.
do that is by optimizing the parts of your health that you have the opportunity to control. You can't control that genetic part of it, but you can control your nutrition, your diet, your activity, your sleep, your stress, because those things mean that you may be less vulnerable to that genetic predisposition.
That
So
make
yeah.
that makes perfect sense because of the fact that you may be predisposed, right? And if you find out, like say for instance with the cancer, or I'm just throwing out there, and I don't know if it's genetic or not, multiple sclerosis, so that kind of
Mhm.
thing. If you know that there's something in diet, if I'm hearing you correctly, that will exasperate that, then you have to make a decision to alleviate that, or do it very rarely in your gut health and your taking in of things, so that you can possibly ward off not having to deal with that going down that genetic line.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, I mean, this has been very interesting. It's very, has been very educational as to how the gut health, even though we are given the genes that we were given, that still there is possibly something that we can do to help ward off even a genetic predisposition. Sometimes
Mhm.
it's just there, but to be able to make ourselves more comfortable as we live, um, by taking care of ourselves, um, both
Yeah.
medically and possibly holistically at the same time.
So when Houston is really well known for like cancer treatment, and when you go to a lot of these places here in Houston, they usually address you holistically.
Mm-hmm.
So you really have a cancer oncologist, but then you also have a nutritionist. They usually also are recommending that you get or talk to some therapists or something, because again, they recognize the power of controlling these other things. We may not always have complete control over the genetic predisposition or the presence of cancer, but actually modifying some of these things that we have control over actually improve outcomes. And they
So,
found that when you go in this
uh,
direction, you get better outcomes.
okay, okay. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
It's fine. It's fine.
So, do we have any questions on things that are, if anyone in the audience has anything specific that they would like to see if Patrice has knowledge on, maybe something as far as gut or a genetic predisposition that ones would have, and whether or not there's anything that she would be able to recommend to do. And then the other thing with that is that just to know is that moving forward, and we'll give each one time enough to think of anything, but moving forward, one of the things that in Patrice's passion, in order to be able to help ourselves help each other, um, I call it when we've talked, she's growing a platform to where not only does she see ones clinically, but on her own to present something that is I call it a third party second opinion. So, you may be long distance and not here in Houston, or, she's open to looking at labs to give you a third party second opinion. Not to say that you're going to turn away from your doctor, but give you the words to have the conversation, to speak more in a medical a way, so that your provider will know that you've educated yourself, and you now know what you know, and you're asking questions that's going to help you as you go along the line. So that's forthcoming. And if anyone is interested in having her have those expertise, you can always reach back out and drop something in the chat if you would like, so that I can connect you with her. And she's happy to expound more on what her platform would look like when she does this third party second opinion. And so let me check and see if there was anything that was dropped in the chat. Okay, and so she also put her email address in there, that she also put her email address in there, so that if anyone wants to reach out, that they're able to reach out to her and um, get some assistance in dealing with beauty inside out. So,
Yeah.
you know, this has been very insightful, Patrice,
Mm.
and I don't see that we have any questions in the chat at all. Is there any last words that you would like to give us?
Um, so I think the biggest thing is that I encourage everybody to be an active participant in
Mm.
their health.
Hold on just one moment. I don't know what happened to my volume. There you go. Speak again, maybe.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I hear you now.
Yeah, so just encouraging us all to be active participants in our health. Ask the questions, even if you don't feel like you have the words. Take your time. I usually say when you go to your doctor's office, have a list. Write things down before you go in so that when you get in, you don't feel overwhelmed, you don't feel nervous. The medical professionals that you see, your doctors, your practitioners, they are there to help you. They are there to not only just provide medicine, but also help navigate you through these health concerns and issues. So have the conversations. If you are not comfortable with your practitioner to the point where you can have those conversations, then you find somebody who you are comfortable with, and there's no harm in that because really this should be a mentorship like, hey, I have this experience, I have this knowledge, and I'm helping you navigate through the medical, you know, the stuff so that you can feel comfortable. But you should be a part of that decision making process. And if you're in a you have questions, you should be open to ask those questions. So I encourage you to be active. Going to the doctors is not a passive thing. It should be active. You should come with things that you have concerns about, and you should leave with actionable tasks that you may be responsible for doing. So it should be an active, and I encourage you to make it as active as possible.
Mhm. So if I'm hearing you correctly, if the physician is acting like they don't want to participate and they're there just to check you off, then that's not necessarily the person for you.
Yeah, and everybody requires certain things to feel warm and cozy and
Right.
comfortable. But if you're working with somebody and you can't ask the questions, or you feel dismissed when you ask questions, or you don't feel that they are paying appropriate attention to your concerns, then that's usually a cue to go find somebody who will. There are enough people in the medical community who are passionate, who are genuinely interested in being helpful. So you just have to find somebody who's um, available to you in that way.
Okay. Well, we thank you so much for joining us on Beauty Inside Out. And we will look forward to our next guest, which happens to be an area that Patrice actually touched on, that some people will come to her to see her from the advice of her dentist. So the next thing that we're going to discuss, I believe it is going to be August the 24th, um, Sunday, 6 p.m. again, and we're going to have a oral hygienist uh, come and give us information about how she can see beauty inside out from what she sees in your mouth from an oral point of view. So, Patrice, thank you so much for joining us today. We really do appreciate it, and I'll see you soon.
Yes, see you soon. Thank
All right.
you.
Uh-huh. Thank you.